You should play Spire's End. Spire's End is a narrative choose-your-own-adventure game with some light dice combat mechanics, designed by Gregory Favro and with some amazing art by Benjamin Wiseman. And this is a game that I've had in my collection for quite a long time, actually, and I'm surprised I haven't made a video about it yet. But this is a game that I've always wanted to make a video of. I just never really got around to it. And then, of course, I had like my break and stuff like that. So I'm now definitely ready to make a video about it, especially because there is another game coming out in the series called Spires and Rangataki, I believe it's called. And I am super excited. I got in touch with Gregory, actually, and I believe he's going to try to send me one of the prototype copies for that in the new year. So be on the lookout for that one if you enjoy this video. Additionally, there is another game called Spires and Hildegard, which is actually based on one of the characters in the original Spires End, which is what I'm going to show you today. And that one's a little bit more on the lighter end in terms of theme and stuff like that. The original Spires End is a lot darker, and you can just tell by the way it looks and stuff like that. But this is a game that I absolutely love. I think it's a really amazing solo experience, but it also plays extremely well with two players, and you can even play it with a third player, with the third person acting as sort of like a pseudo dungeon master who's going to end up reading all the cards and presenting the different choices the players have to do, as well as playing the enemy when it comes to actual dice combat. And this is a game that is super as well, easy to set up, easy to take down. It doesn't take up a lot of table space. So if you are looking for sort of that last minute Christmas gift, or maybe just you want to use this as a personal gift for someone in the future, this is a great board game that I think if you know someone, or if you are someone yourself who loves choose your own adventure style games, you love a good narrative, but you still sort of want a little bit of dice rolling involved, I think this is the perfect game for you. Now, there's not too much to talk about when it comes to this old Spire's Endgame in terms of exactly how to play it and stuff like that. Obviously, I don't want to dive into every single thing and do. This is one of the games that you, even though I wanted to make a video on this game for a while, this isn't a game that I wanted to do sort of a let's play of, just because obviously for people who might be interested in this game, I don't want to spoil too much of it. But you know, if the game has been out for a fairly long time, maybe I'll throw up a let's play down the road. But I will go over today just sort of how the general combat works and sort of the nature of the game. If you look, I'll switch the overhead now, but if you look, I have the combat format set up right now, but ideally you have this big deck of cards. You can't actually see from the overhead, but if you see, this is the whole deck of cards. I don't remember the count off the top of my head, unfortunately, but there is a lot of cards. That essentially is sort of the whole story and the whole game, essentially, is you go from the top of the deck to the bottom of the deck, revealing different things. Sometimes you might take out, depending on your choices, you might take out certain cards. They're all numbered 1 to, it's a little over 100 cards. And throughout that, you'll of course be making a variety of different choices. You'll be getting loot, and ultimately figuring out what the end to the story is. There are multiple endings to the story. There's a lot of different choices you can make in the story that will affect how things go. And then of course, you're going to be ending up encountering different enemies along the way. And don't worry, I'm not spoiling too much. This is literally the first enemy that you encounter that I have set up here, the doorman, and he is literally found within the first like five page turns or 5 cards that you end up reading. But the way that it works is you actually have a troop of heroes, or a troop of adventurers that are trying to discover what is going on in this spire. There is a little bit of a lead up and a little bit of a prologue that you'll get into, just sort of set the story up and why you are at the spire itself. But there are 7 adventurers total, and they all have, again, super amazing art. I am someone who judges board games by the cover, in terms of if I see a board game that has just a really unique aesthetic, a really striking art style, I'm just immediately drawn to that board game. And this is one of the games that caught my eye years ago. And so the way that the game works is, before you even get into reading the story, you'll end up shuffling the ally cards and you'll pick 2 of them, and those will be your first 2 characters. And even if you're playing solo, like true solo, you will be controlling 2 characters regardless. And at the same time, though, you'll have your ally deck off to the side, and if any characters end up dying that you're currently controlling of, you'll just draw a new one from the top of the ally deck, and only until you completely deplete that ally deck will your game be over. Now, how does the game actually play? So, obviously, like I said before, I've already selected the first little enemy here, but you can see here that this is the very first card, is the prologue. So you really just take the top card, you'll flip it over, you'll read it, and you'll do exactly what it says. Obviously, some cards will have choices on them, some cards will require you having certain items, some cards will also have like a key lock where you'll actually roll these glyph dice, and you'll actually try to look for a specific symbol. It's a very, very light game in terms of mechanics, but it still is involved enough where it feels like you have some nice randomness in there with dice rolls, and there is just the perfect amount there where you don't have to have, like, it's not a big cognitive load, but it's not just you reading paragraph after paragraph. And once you encounter an enemy, you'll of course have a specific setup for that enemy. Some enemies come with its own mechanics and things like that. But the cool thing about this game is, also one thing I'll note is I do have these red dice to equal the amount of health that the character has, and I do have a black dice to represent the armor that the character has. However, those are my own dice. The game comes with red, black dice or red black cubes to actually represent those. But honestly, if you're someone like me and you have a lot of leftover dice from tabletop role-playing games or whatever, it's just easier to manage, because sometimes you do end up with like 10 plus cubes that you have to move around, and it's just a little bit more of a hassle. But you will be using some of the cubes to keep track of different status effects and stuff like that for both yourself and for the enemy. So when you first get into combat, the first player on your left, or the character on your left, is always considered player 1, and the person on your right is considered player 2. The rounds go in order always. There's no change in it, but it always goes player 1, player 2, and then the enemy will act. And the cool thing about this game is you have a bunch of different actions you can take on each character sheet that you can see here. However, you'll notice that on the left side of them, they have a number corresponding to them. This is actually the amount of health that you have to spend to do these abilities. So it's very much a resource management game as well, where you're trying to manage your health, being able to use, should you go for a stronger ability that comes with its own variety of effects, but there is still a chance of missing, and at that point that you essentially just have wasted life at that point. So there's a lot of decisions where you have to make and what the right actions to take at the right time. Each character is very, very unique in how they play. Some characters, like Dane, for example, this character can potentially get life back when he attacks other characters. And once you've actually chosen an action and you spent the appropriate amount of health, you'll roll a D10, and the game comes with 2 black D10s and a red D10. Red D10s typically for the enemy. And you'll roll, and you'll have a different amount of results, and they'll be on based on thresholds. So, for example, if I wanted to do this bash and boot, his first action, it would cost me 1 health, so I'd go down to 5 health. I'd roll a D10, and I got a natural 1. So obviously, my tabletop role-playing experience is in infiltrating this video. That would be a miss, and I essentially would have just wasted that health. I would have essentially just needed a 4 to 5 to do 1 damage, a 6 to 7 to do 2 damage, and on an 8, it's a D8, not a D10. If I got an 8, I would do 3 damage, and I would get a health back. So after you've done an action, the game for each player also goes through 3 different phases. So you have your action phase, you have your recoup phase, and then you have your upkeep phase. So after you're done your action, you then move to recouping. And recouping is something that every character has, and even the enemy has. It doesn't cost health to do, and pretty much your base recoup action is going to be healing. So you can roll a D8, and on 4 to 6 you get 1 health back, on a 7 you get 2 health back, and on an 8 you get 3 health back. But some characters, like Dane here for example, has a separate recoup action you can take. So on a 4 to 8, I would actually be able to cleanse, but I would have to choose one of the other. So I can't do heal and cleanse, for example. You get the option of one of those ones, and you can also even heal your allies as well. So it is a team effort, and it is a cooperative experience at the end of the day. So after you're done recouping as well, then it goes to upkeep, where you would essentially take bleeding damage, or you would, if you had any other status effects, you'd tick them down off the status effects tracker, and then it would move on to the next character. And then you would essentially just rinse and repeat. Now, once you get to the enemy, though, that's when things get a little bit different. So first off, the enemy will actually roll a D8 and see who they're targeting. So roll a D8, the enemy gets a 2. So if on a 1 to 4, the first player gets targeted. On a 5 to 8, then the second player gets targeted. So I got a 2, so Dane here is essentially going to be targeted by the enemy, and the enemy has pretty much the same setup as the players. They do get their own recoup action, and they also have a different set of actions here. The only difference is they don't have to spend their health to actually do their actions. What they'll do is they actually have an action deck. So they'll choose the top card of the action deck and the number corresponding to that. So we got a 2 here, so that it'll select the action 2, and it'll also have a D8 dice roll and see what happens. So it's going to be a stab. On a 4, it's 1 damage. On a 5 to 7, it's 2 damage. And on a 8, it is 2 damage plus the A ability, which always is listed at the bottom there. So A equals bleed for 1 turn on one of the on the ally, and you're considered the ally. So I got a 2 here. So that is actually going to be a miss. So that was actually my bad dice roll. Actually came in handy there. So the enemy ends up missing, and then they move on to their recoup phase, which they would get to roll. I got a 1. So he wouldn't heal, but obviously he would be able to heal if I got 4 to 7 or an 8, and then from there it would just go on. So like you can see, it's a very, very simple dice rolling game. There's not a lot of complexity to it. However, there is still enough decision making where you really have to find the balance of, okay, do I use all my health to just do this really, really strong attack, but I still have potential to miss? Or do I go for just more of a steady, low amount of damage, but I'm able to recoup that in my recoup phase. It also makes some good decisions if you have a character who's better at healing, for example, or has some other recoup abilities that can make for some interesting things. The second player here, Hildegard, for example, has a different recoup action called Hijinks, which can Hijinks can end up. Actually, what is Hijinks? Oh, Hijinks applies a bunch of different effects. So on a 5 to 6, they're all letter coordinated at the very, very bottom to see what status effects happen depending on what you roll. Hildegard as well is the character that's in the second game in the series, and I believe it's focused on sort of like her upbringing. So it's a little bit more on the lighthearted side. It's not as grim dark as this one. But yeah, I absolutely love this game. It doesn't take super, super long to get through. If you want to do a full run in a night, you can dedicate, a couple to a few hours to do so. However, obviously, you can play it at your own pace as well because it doesn't take up a lot of table space. It's also fairly easy to save as well because all of the cards are numbered. If you ever get to a point where you just need to pick up the game and put it away, you can easily do that, and you can remember where you got off. Like, you don't even have to put all the deck back together again. And even putting the deck back together again is super easy just because everything's coordinated by number. So that is Spire's End. This is just a game I wanted to share with you guys. This is a game that I really, really enjoy, and I'm very, very much looking forward to checking out Spire's End Rangataki, because that game is going to be kickstarted hopefully soon. But again, Greg said he was going to try to send me one of the prototype copies in January. And if I do get my hands on Hildegard, Spires and Hildegard at some point, maybe I'll do a Let's Play on that one. And it seems like each time Greg makes a new Spires End game, he does add some new mechanics and changes how things go. So Spires and Hildegard, for example, doesn't follow the exact same recipe as this one, and Spires and Rangataki as well. I doubt will follow the same recipe as the original. It'll essentially just be a new experience, a new story to explore, and the writing is also extremely well done. It's not like super verbose, it's not overly complicated, it's a very, very easy story to follow. And which I really, really like without being super simple. But that's Spire's End. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you all are going to be having an amazing holiday, because this is probably going to be my last video for well, actually, maybe not. My holidays for work are starting fairly early this year because I took extra few days off. So I have one more day of work tomorrow, and then I have 2 weeks off for the holidays. So I'm very, very much looking forward to spending time with family and friends. But if I have some time to get a video out, then I will. But if this is the last time I see you until the new year, hopefully you have a great and happy holidays and new year, and I will see you in the next one.